Hi, my name is Alejandro Pérez Pérez, and this is the AI Coffee Podcast. Every week, you will have one disruptive aspect of technology and artificial intelligence for the time to drink a cup of coffee. Today, we have a very insightful and special guest. His name is Dan. Dan is an expert in AI, innovation, and the future of work. With decades of experience at leading tech companies like Google, McKinsey, Atlassian, and his own venture, he has helped build and lead teams that created products for billions of customers worldwide. Wow, Dan, what a great career. Welcome. How do you feel? Are you ready to the AI Coffee podcast?
Awesome, Alejandro. Yes, I'm feeling good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to your listeners about AI. It's an exciting time in the world, and I'm excited to dig into some of the things that are making the biggest change for teams all over.
Mhm. Thank you very much for being here. I know that you are a very busy person, so you have a lot of like things to do, and thank you very much for having this hour for discussing about AI. So the first question, Dan, I have a question for you to start with, and also for the audience to know a little bit of you. Is as you said, you were working in Google, you were working in McKinsey, and also in other startups. So um, why did you decide to reinvent yourself in many different times?
Yeah, I think reinvention has been a huge part of my life since the very beginning. And your audio listeners won't be able to see this, but it actually says reinvent on my shirt right now. It says that every day. I have like 18 of them. Um, but from my very young age, I started. I'm the exact right age to have started my first corporate job before we had PCs. And about a year into that first job, we got a shipment of PCs. We got like 10 of them. And we didn't have computers. We didn't know what software to run on them. We didn't know how they worked. We didn't know how to find files or how big they could be. Um, and that was confusing and scary for a lot of people. But for me, it was like I was a kid on Christmas. I opened up these computer boxes and I set them up, and I got to play games if I could find them, and amazing pieces of software. And I realized that computer was going to change the way we worked. And so I made learning how to use it, my favorite thing. And then 5 years after that, we got the internet. And then 5 years after that, BlackBerry put phones in our pocket. And 5 years after that, AWS put our data in the cloud. And then we got data science, and then we got remote teams, whether we wanted them or not. And now we have AI. For me, the world is constantly reinventing around us. And if you recognize these pivotal moments and grab onto the new box that just came from the loading dock and open it up and figure out how to change your team will be more successful. It'll be more fun. You'll get to play with new cool toys. And that's why I'm here. And it's been 32 years now, and I'm super excited to keep seeing what's next as it comes.
Wow, it's amazing that your first adventure was without computers. So quite a while of time, right?
Yeah, that was to date myself accurately. My first job was in 1992, so 32 years ago. We were using mostly paper job bags. We'd write things down, check things off lists, put stickers on stuff, and the computer it changed the way we did all of those things, and it was pretty amazing.
Mhm. That's true. That's interesting how innovation is like the key of the world nowadays, but also during the last decades. So, how did you see innovation? Because I think it's also a very key word of your life. So,
Mhm.
how do you see innovation from this, let's say, 30 years old perspective of working?
Right, right. So I think the first thing that I noticed is that it it's happening constantly, right? There's always new things being innovated in the world, new things coming at us, new things that we have to react to, new things that we want to try. And so there's a constant stream. And so it's something that you have to put deliberate attention toward figuring out how to do. And then secondly, it happens more quickly than you realize. Like, I said in 1993 or so, we got our first PCs. By 1996, we were all using them every single day. Right. And then, in 1997 or so, we started to get internet access. By 2000, there was an internet bubble. We were using it at our house to book flights. Like, 3 or 4 or 5 years is all a cycle like that takes. And then all of a sudden it's ubiquitous. And so when I see, that a new thing like that, and the new thing right now is either remote work or AI, depending on which of those you're still trying to figure out. And you get about 5 years to figure it out. And then the next one comes. And so if you're still figuring out the old one when the next one comes, you're going to start getting behind. And, for organizations that are 3 or 4 cycles behind, it's, the end is starting to get pretty near, right? Yeah. So tackle the innovation as it comes. That's my biggest lesson for organizations and people everywhere.
Wow, what a great advice for starting this podcast. So thank you. So you talk about organization, but as I said before in the introduction, the beginning, you work with big companies, with really big tech companies, but also with startups. So talking about innovation, where do you see that innovation is? Is it in the big world or in the small one?
I think the first thing I'll say is the big world is smaller than you think. When I worked at McKinsey and Company, I led a software incubator inside of McKinsey. And our job was to build things that made McKinsey consultants faster and maybe smarter or whatever. But we only had about 45 developers. We had 8 product people, 1 marketing person. My technology org inside of McKinsey was about 60 people big. And so even though I was in this massive organization, maybe with billions of dollars of capital, I was a small team, scrappy resources, fighting for prioritization. Google looked exactly the same as that. In Google, my team was like 100 people. And we were, having to ruthlessly prioritize, and we were struggling to get a new hire. The startups that I worked at were the same. It's a big world and small world have a lot more in common than most people realize. Big teams are always collections of smaller teams. And so, on your team, whatever size it is, maybe it's 9 or 10 people, maybe it's 25 people, maybe it's 85 people. You're probably struggling with a lot of the same stuff that I was struggling with at Google, or struggling with at McKinsey, or struggling with at Atlassian. We all have a lot more in common than you think.
It sounds really that you're passionate about teams, about teamwork, about you work in many different kind of teams, as you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
So you mention usually when you talk in public the term of future of teams as a concept. So
Right.
how do you see the future of teams in the next 5 years, let's say?
Yeah. So for a long time, I've been helping people collaborate better, like leverage technology to innovate faster, all those things. But people can achieve more when they're together as a team, right? I could work with individual consultants, right? Individual coaches, or individual, I don't know, sports, physical therapists, whatever. But it's more interesting to me to focus on people and the way they collaborate with each other to achieve some shared goal. And so that's been my focus for a long time. And over the next 5 years, the way I see that shifting is definitely AI is going to create a tremendous impact on the way people collaborate. Right now, we spend, as knowledge workers, we spend a lot of time in email meetings and in chat. Some studies show 64 or 68% of our time is spent communicating about our work. It might be true that since COVID, that number is as high as 80% of our time. 4 out of every 5 days, we're just talking to each other. And then on Friday, we're trying to get actual work done, right? AI is going to make that a little bit better. Maybe a lot better. I don't know, but at least a little bit better. Because AI is really great at managing information. And so if you and I have a discussion like this one, I can have an AI note taker taking notes from this conversation. So a person that didn't even hear the conversation could look at the notes and see what they missed. And then if there are parts of that conversation that are interesting, they can dive in and listen to just that part of the meeting. I've been at places where we had meetings with 200 people in them, and it was like 4 people talking and 196 people just sitting there listening the whole time. Like that's an expensive meeting. And if we can make that a little bit better by sharing smart summary documents, by creating digests, by looking at our inboxes with hundreds of messages and creating summaries of all the things that you missed while you were on vacation last week, those are going to create massive impacts in the way that we collaborate as people on teams. And that's the biggest thing, I think.
It sounds really that you're passionate also about AI, but we will talk about AI a little bit later because I will continue with the teams because I
Yeah.
think it's very relevant because part of the audience of this podcast are freelance, for example.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And you mentioned big companies, startups, but
Mm-hmm.
I am also thinking about freelancers that I think this is a popular thing coming little by little in the market, in I think globally. So how do you see also this freelance like moment nowadays?
Right. So the first thing is freelancers are the original remote workers, right? So they've been figuring out how to work remotely for decades, right? Depending on how long they've been in the freelance space. And so freelancers have learned something about the world that other people are trying to learn from. And so freelancers have the ability to be thought leaders in how to make remote work, how to one of the things that freelancers have done that's amazing is they talk about the value that they're creating, not about the hours that it takes to make that, right? If I create a designer to create a new website for me, they quote me a price for the website, right? The great ones, right? Right? They quote the website. Not they don't say I'm going to charge you $10 an hour forever until it's done, right? They have an understanding of the work that they do and the value that they're selling. And in most knowledge worker situations, there's not an understanding of that. They go to the office for 42 hours or 47 hours or 36 hours, whatever it might be, and they get paid to show up. And now that we're all remote work, that system doesn't work. And so freelancers have the opportunity to illustrate to the world, make YouTube channels, write blog posts, talk about how you survive in a world that's not show up at the office for 42 hours and get a paycheck at the end of the week. Because the billions of people are trying to figure that out, and freelancers are the leading edge of that wave. And I think that's going to be an amazing thing to capitalize on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I see the point, and actually, it's very relevant also learning how to show the value you are producing with your output. Of course, this is very relevant. This is also a thing I think we all are learning little by little because it's not easy. Because, well, of course, I'm also a freelancer, so at the beginning, the first thing is, okay, how much hours this is going to take to me. So more or less, I will think about that. But this is very, very not convenient at all for any of the parts, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much, much better. But I think this is like high level freelance,
Right, right.
understanding how much value this is going to be for the customer, and also thinking, okay, uh, then I can how can I put this in a, let's say, in an invoice or something later on.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a very complicated formula. Yeah.
right. And yeah, I think that that takes lots of forms, but I think people on the freelance side of things have developed an independence, right? They're self-directed, they understand how to turn work on and then turn work off. Right? They've navigated all of these things that some of us that have been in office buildings for 3 decades are trying to figure out. You know, like I work from my house right now, and figuring out should I start at 8 a.m. every day, or should I just sleep in as long as I can? Um, those are hard questions. And the more we are independent, the harder those questions might be. But even people that are independent completely, freelance 100%, I still think that your customers are part of your team. The peers that also do the same thing as you, that you're friends with, that's part of your team too, because you're learning from them, you're talking to your customers, you want to do that efficiently. Their opinions are important in how your business develops. And so even if you think of yourself as a one person team, I would challenge that thinking a little bit and start expanding that circle and figure out who else helps shape the way you make decisions, because that's what your team actually looks like.
Mhm. That's a good advice. I take note also. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
So Dan, you talked a little bit before about AI. Let's take it back, because I think this is very relevant. This is the AI Coffee podcast, and you're also an AI expert. So I was curious about asking you something, because I saw that you were working when you were working at McKinsey, that you were facing, maybe leading a team working with global warming, COVID-19, for example,
Hmm.
and really large scale issues like that with AI. So, can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe how AI can really play a role on this game?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So first, I'll say I want to create a little bit of a division in time between what's sort of the old AI or classic AI and the new AI, which is more generative ChatGPT stuff. Um, the AI that's been around for a long time is really machine learning. And I don't want to get too technical, but mostly what that means is the way I describe it is like when you go to the airport, you have a flight. Before you go to the gate, you have to put your suitcase on that scanner, and the TSA looks at your suitcase to make sure there's not a knife inside or something dangerous, whatever. Um, that scanner's looking at suitcases over and over and over and over again, and it's trying to decide what does a bad suitcase look like. That's what machine learning is. It's just looking at something. It has very constrained pass fail cases, and it's trying to evaluate, did this thing pass or did it fail? And sometimes a new thing goes in on the suitcase belt and that's never seen before, and the scanner isn't sure. So it asks the person sitting there to take a look, and then it knows better next time. And that's why it's called machine learning, because it's every time it sees a new case, it understands if that's a pass or a fail. Now, all of us on all of our jobs have that TSA scanner thing happening sometimes. We look at projects to see if they're on track or not on track. We look at designs to understand if this is a good design that matches the expectations of the customer or not. That pass fail thing is happening all the time. And sometimes we have fancy software helping us do that. But sometimes, a lot of the time, we're just using our eyes and our experience. Um, that's how machine learning works. And I'll call that sort of the old AI. Before 2022, when ChatGPT came out, most of us in the world were trying to use machine learning to do some things. We looked at global healthcare data to see if the spread was getting worse or better. We looked at manufacturing data to see if they were sustainable or not sustainable. We looked at banking data to see if profitability was going up or going down. And we would use technology to do that. We just look at data over and over again, and we like thumbs up and thumbs down some of the data we saw. And then the scanner got better and better at looking at those things. And so that's what I was doing at McKinsey, at Atlassian, at Civis Analytics when I worked at that startup. All of that was how that worked. And we could talk a little bit more about that, but I'll take a break from talking to see if any of that makes sense and if you have any spin-off questions.
No, I think what you're doing is really interesting and what you are saying. And I took a question that you could maybe reply now with this news continuation.
Uh-huh.
Is if all AI is the new AI? Because as far as I am understanding in LinkedIn, for example, and in all the media, we all talk about ChatGPT, we all talk about generative AI, which is the new AI, let's say. But at the end of the day, I think it ends there. And most of the AI that is used and the powerful AI is most related to this old AI, which is machine learning, which is, I don't know, predictive models, targeting models, and things like that. So that's also a thing to discuss later on if you want, is if the old AI is the new AI.
I think the way I would describe it is there's sort of a stack. The old AI is necessary for the new AI to function, right? When you run ChatGPT, let's say you're at a hospital and you run ChatGPT on a bunch of healthcare records, right? To have it analyze trends and figure out how you might improve. First, it has to do the TSA scanner thing. It has to look at a bunch of data and see, like, is your healthcare situation getting worse or better? Is your manufacturing situation getting worse or better? But then once it knows that, in the old world, we would have just shown that to a consultant and we would have said, like, this is what the chart looks like. What should we do about it? And the consultant would figure out what to do. Now, generative AI can write you a recommendation. And that recommendation is custom on the fly. It's made up on the spot as you invoke it. Now it's using the old AI to figure out like what information, what trends are important in making these decisions. But the generative AI is actually going to write you a plan for action. It's going to tell you what you might do. And that's the new part that didn't exist before. 2020 is when GPT-3 actually came out, but it wasn't until November of 22 that there was a chat interface on top of it. And so that's when the world sort of changed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with you that the new AI, which takes is really a good interface and
Mm-hmm.
a good interoperability also for everyone, because
Mm-hmm.
before that even GPT-2 was there, and GPT-1, and
Mm-hmm.
even other natural language processing models existed before, and many of them were really interested, even though ChatGPT is a really, really relevant product for everyone. And I think this is the good thing, and easy to use.
Right, right,
So
right.
everyone understood what AI was at this moment, not before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's before the chat interface, you needed to be a software developer that could invoke the API to make it work. And there's a small number of software developers in the world. It's like 25 million. That's a big number, but that's not 8 billion. And so the chat interface democratized access to that. But also, a lot of people don't understand when its answers are wrong. How do you know that the answers are wrong? What should you do about it? Should you wait until all its answers are correct before you start using it? That will never happen. So those are hard questions to figure out, and so that's why I quit my job at Google to help people on teams, especially, to figure out how to navigate this new world.
Mm-hmm. it's very necessary to navigate this world. And actually, you didn't mention before, but ethics also, I think, are really relevant when we talk about AI. And one question I had for you is if you see now that if we should maybe be more aware of ethical concerns, if we talk about AI, but also we talk about AI in the teams,
Mm-hmm.
because in many companies, I know that they are developing AIs for targeting, for example, employees, or for understanding if, for example, the company is working remote, if they are working or they are like the productivity of the employees and these kind of things that are really, let's say, on in the limit of the ethical concerns. So how did you see everything like that?
I think I'll say two things. So first of all, if you're doing things with AI to your employees that is either unethical or just irritating, your employees are going to quit anyway. So that problem solves itself, right? Eventually, people don't get jobs at places where they're doing that, and people will be forced to find a more ethical, less intrusive balance. The second thing I'll say is earlier when I started talking about ChatGPT and what it might do, I said the word recommendation. What AI does is always a recommendation. It's not the answer. It's up to you to decide if you should follow that recommendation or not. It's no different than autocorrect on your text message, right? If you're sending a message to a friend and you type the word can't, it says can't wait, can't believe, can't remember. And you can pick one of those three, or you can write your own thing. I can't do that right now. It's up to you to decide if the AI recommendation is what you should pursue or not. And you have the responsibility always as people to be the interface between the AI recommendation and what actually happens in the world. And people that just turn it on autopilot, that's going to be as disastrous if you just let your phone chat with your friends anytime you want using autopilot suggestions, autocomplete suggestions. Like that would be absurd. Your friends would all block you.
Yeah, and actually, talking about ethical aspects, recently I had a proposal for working for a company, let's say as a freelance, for creating, let's say, a kind of chatbot that took, for example, 1,000 articles online every day, analyze them, and rewrite them for another blog. This is
Mm-hmm.
something that we are seeing. I don't even have a term in English to say to name it, but this is like taking the content that belongs to a content creator, a blogger, whoever, and
Mm-hmm.
doing the same thing with ChatGPT and create a lot of content which is exactly the same or it
Mm-hmm.
has the same content. And at the end of the day, what we are creating is, I'm sorry for the word, we are creating shit. We are really uh, have a lot of dirtiness everywhere on internet, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's useless if we see it as, let's say, a big hu- concept, right? How do you
Yeah,
see it?
yeah, yeah. So the first thing is what's happening now is not really that different from what's been happening forever. Like a person who writes a blog often saw other things on the internet first and used that to think about the issue and write some new things. It's very rare for a blogger to write something that's completely unique, that's not derivative in any way. So it's not that different. However, what you're implying is true in that now it's so easy to do it that we're going to create trillions of new blog posts every week. Right? There's going to be people that are just autopilot, right? The most blogs. I have the website with the most blogs. Like that's not a trophy that you should aspire to, but we will create a lot of noise, and that will require that we have tools that help us find the newer content more easily, right? Maybe that will be improved search from Google or Microsoft. Maybe it will be ChatGPT itself helping to filter out the things that are derivative from the things that are new. Maybe we will all actually pay for a subscription to the New York Times because that's where it will be safe and controllable. I'm not sure, right? But what you're saying will happen. We will get a bunch of people creating content that's not a low value, and we will have to find a way to navigate to higher value stuff. We're already kind of doing that. There's a trillion posts every day on Facebook, and somehow we survive, right? We don't look at every single post. Somehow our feeds just get smart and help us figure out how to solve that problem.
Mhm. Yes, actually, it reminds me to an old podcast I did with Alex. For the audience, you can see it on the history of this podcast. And he said that data is the new plastic. And I think that with AI, this is very relevant, that we are creating a lot of noise,
Mm-hmm.
and even we are polluting. This is also a sustainable issue because all of these trillions of posts that are creating and are low value
Mm-hmm.
are also polluting our world because they are in data centers. They need
Yeah.
to spend a lot of energy and money to keep this data. And if
Mm.
you see from the society perspective, it's completely worthless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe something that in a couple of years we will be looking at us and saying, why did you do that? It's
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
useless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is funny.
We almost certainly will look back and learn some lessons that we should have seen coming. Uh, and that's important. So if you're out there and you're a listener and you're thinking about using AI to automatically generate 1,000 blog posts, maybe don't do that. Please.
Think on the world. This is very
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, then let's continue thinking about the world, but in another different manner. You talk a lot of times about remote work in this podcast, and I agree with you that this is very relevant. I do remote work as well, and for my personal life, I think it's much better because I can maybe wake up later. I can decide if I mean want to stop for lunch at one time or maybe a little bit later, prepare my own meals instead of buying things. So this is even healthier for me.
Hmm.
But how do you see also in because many people think that the collaboration is harder working remotely. Also, the productivity could be different or the creativity because, and this part maybe I will agree that we work better face to face sometimes for creativity rather than instead working through a technology, because this is a blocker, even though it's very interesting, very easy nowadays. But
Hmm.
how do you see from the, let's say, corporate perspective, business perspective, from your experience?
Yeah, that's a complex conversation. I have lots of personal opinions, and I've seen a lot of different experiments with remote work. For your listeners, just yesterday or 2 days ago, at the time of this recording, Amazon has announced full office 5 days a week going forward. And we'll see what the ripple effect is on that from a employee perspective. Employers will certainly learn some lessons on what employees' preference is. But I think there are some productivity influences in being completely scattered. There are some uh, uh, cost of life parameters from being in the office every day, right? If I'm in the office, I live about an hour and a half from downtown Chicago in the U.S., and so for me to commute back and forth to Google, it took 3 hours a day. That's huge. That's a huge cost on my life. I don't get to go to soccer games, right? I don't get to have dinner with my wife. Those things are a big deal. And so I think finding a right balance, I think, is going to be important. I don't think we're going back to the world where everybody just goes to an office every day. But I also have some very strong opinions that the hybrid plan that many organizations are doing is broken. Um, if you're gonna let's say your desire is to have people in the office 2 days a week, Um, what you're actually saying is 2/5 of the time I want people together. The worst way to do that is to have them come in Tuesday and Wednesday and then disappear, or have some people Tuesday and Wednesday and other people Wednesday and Thursday, or Friday and Monday, or everyone's got to be together or not together like that. That's an important part of being together in the office. What I would much rather see is people being in the office together for 5 days in a row and then disappearing for 3 or 4 weeks and working remotely independently, and then come back together and work there for 4 or 5 days in a row again. Um, it's more helpful if you're together for longer durations, if it's planned on the calendar, so that you know, like, every fifth week is our strategy week, it's our creativity week, it's our problem solving week. When everyone is in the office here and there, some Tuesdays, not every Tuesday, you're not getting the benefit. You might as well just be completely remote. So I think my main point is, I think people will still find the balance. They'll figure out what hybrid really means, because I think there are some significant cost implications to cost of productivity, cost of work life, cost of development. Like a new person in their 20s that never works from an office never gets to see a manager leading another person that isn't them. They never get to see it ever. And I would propose that I learned a lot about being a great leader from watching leaders. And I worry about that for people that are full remote for their whole career. I don't think they become great leaders.
Hmm. Maybe leadership nowadays is different. Maybe
Yeah,
also
yeah,
this is
yeah.
also a
That's yeah,
possibility. Who knows?
yeah.
But yes, I get the point, and I agree with you that nowadays in many companies they go to hybrid, but they understand hybrid as every Wednesday you are forced to come to the office. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
so. And for me, this is completely worthless, because maybe this week, this Wednesday, you need a focus day for working, and it's better for you coming, I don't know, next Monday. I don't know.
Right, right,
But
right.
the first thing is, flexibility is for me very relevant in many of the digital jobs, let's say, digital roles.
Mm-hmm.
But also what you mentioned, I think is very interesting. Instead of every week or something like that, really taking the effect of being all together every, I don't know, once 1 week in a month or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, but really pretending or acting for creating value together. Maybe, I don't know, going to a team building event, or doing something really for meeting people and create this collaboration that I think
Yeah, just
is not, it's not only because you are sitting next to another person. You need also
right,
to
right,
collaborate. Yeah.
right, right, right. And just having lunch together builds relationships, right? Like you go and have lunch together for 3 days in a row with somebody, you start eventually you stop talking about the work a little bit and you start talking about life. You get to know people, they become your friends. It's much harder to develop friendships with people that live in another state that you never see in person. It's possible, it's not impossible, but those things are important. And as we look at the health of organizations and teams over time, as we look at the longevity of people working at organizations, I think we'll find that some of these things have societal impact and emotional impact, and some of those things are good. Some of it adds diversity, right? When all your people don't need to live in downtown Chicago, you can hire more diverse talent, and that's great, right? When all your people don't need to commute for 3 hours a day, you can hire people that need to pick their kid up from school at 4:35, right? And that fixes some very important diversity issues in the world, and so that all those things are very positive benefits from the remote work. But we also have to figure out, like, what are the things that it broke and how can we fix those things.
Mhm. Yes, I agree. Let's be positive and think how to take the advantage of everything all together and create like a better even
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
way of
exactly,
working.
exactly.
Mhm. Okay, so Dan, we are almost ending. So I have a very relevant question for you at the end. So, as you have been working in many different kinds of organizations, I think this question is very relevant for you. So, I would like you to send an inspiring message, maybe for someone that wants to learn about AI, about organizations, maybe being a public speaker, as you, for example. Um, let's also think about maybe a person around 30 years old or maybe this age. What
Mm-hmm.
would you tell to this person?
I think the first thing is be a continuous learner. Constantly read books and watch YouTube videos and try to go to some conferences. You want a diversity of input to the things that you think. And I get that from conferences and from YouTube. I watch YouTube maybe 10 hours a week. And I go to now I'm a speaker, so I go to conferences all the time. But before, I usually went to 2 or 3 conferences a year, and that's how I met other people with different thought leadership perspectives. One of the people that I saw early in my life was Eric Ries. He's the author of the Lean Startup. It's a book, and seeing him speak, it changed the way I thought about the work that I did. And so you should do that. You should get out in the world. You should get inputs from other thought leaders. Then, if you decide you have some of your own thoughts in the world, then you should start applying to speak at some conferences. Now, you don't usually get paid to do that at first, but first you need practice. First, you need to do it a couple dozen times, right, before you realize, are you good at it? Can you speak in front of 800 people without getting nervous? Do you memorize your lines or not? Are you saying something that's unique in the world? Those are things that you'll figure out next. But it all happens gradually, one step at a time.
This is a very good advice. So I will also take it for me. So thank you.
Awesome.
And Dan, we are ending. So just 2 questions I ask at the end of every episode. One is, how can the audience contact you if they want to learn from your experience, or just saying thank you for this participation here? And then the other one is, which is your favorite type of coffee? Because this is the AI Coffee podcast. Podcast is very relevant here. So we are also wondering that.
Awesome. So, first question, the best way to get a hold of me is usually on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. I post almost every day. Uh, I'm easy to find on the internet if you can spell my last name, which is Chu, Chuu, and then park, like what you do with a car, and then off, like what you do with a switch. Chuparkoff. I'm one of the only Chuparkoffs. There's only like 20 of us in the world, so you'll find me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have conversations. Follow me. I'll follow you. I'll like your posts, and we'll start a conversation about innovation in the future of teams, and that's what I'm here for. The coffee question is a little bit harder because I actually don't drink coffee. But
Oh,
if I meet somebody for coffee, I would get like a vanilla chai, a tea, something like that. I very much enjoy tea, so I'll do that.
wow. So, that you are the first person saying so in this podcast. You have this honor. So maybe now is the moment to close the conversation and delete it. I don't know.
Well,
Let's
I
hope
like
so.
being unique in the world, so I'll take the honor, whether it's a good one or a bad one. And it's been a pleasure having the conversation with you, Alejandro, and I'm looking forward to listening to some of your other episodes that come in the future.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think it was very valuable, even though you don't like coffee. Maybe the audience is not going to forgive you. Let's see it. But yeah, it was really, really interesting. Thank you very much for your time. And yeah, see you soon.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'll see you on the internet.
And also, thank you to you that you are watching until the end. Thank you very much for following me, for following Dan. Also, you have the links on the description below. And let's see you in the next episode. Bye bye.